the platform. Step up and speak out.
It's 7:30 p.m. on a Monday evening, only on ZiFM Stereo, my station, your station. We thank you for tuning in and for choosing us. My name is Farai, Mwakutuya, bringing you this edition of the platform. We do it every Monday evening at 7:30 p.m. And tonight we are talking about a topic that was very, made a lot of people get into talk last week. It was a ruling in the courts that has to do with the conversion of bank balances from US dollar to Zimbabwe dollars. I'm joined in the studio by none other than a lawyer who represented the people who went to the courts to challenge that decision, but he's also a member of parliament. He's the legislator for Harare East, none other than Honorable Tendai Biti. Sir, great to have you on the program.
Good evening, Farai. Good evening to the viewers and listeners.
Fantastic. As I said, this is a very hot topic. When we posted it on social media, people were asking questions, making comments and contributions. Would love to hear from you. So do get in touch with us via Twitter if you go to our Twitter platform, but also in the studio directly via our WhatsApp line. The number is 0731 168 045. 0731 168 045. Honorable BT, to kick us off and by way of giving us a bit of background, could you briefly tell us what the details of this case were? What was being argued here and why?
Thank you, Mkoma Farai. My clients, Penelope Stone and Richard Biti, are two architects in Harare. They run a studio called the Stone Biti Studio. So they design buildings, and they've designed some of the most important buildings in our city. So in 2018, they had 142,000 US dollars sitting in their account. And as you know, Mkoma Farai, in 2018, we were using the US dollar as legal tender. They're fairly elderly, Richard and Penelope. So I would have thought that maybe that money was also going to, they would treat it as pension money. So on the 1st of August, 1st of October 2018, the Central Bank, or the Reserve Bank as we called it, released an exchange control directive number 120 of 2018, Exchange Control Directive R120 of 2018, in which they advised banks on a know your customer basis to separate US dollar accounts and people's accounts between what they called Nostro US dollar, Nostro FCA, and Nostro RTGS. So my clients were really worried and said, look, aren't we back to 2007? Aren't we back to 2008? So they wrote to their bank, Cabs, and said, Mr. Cabs, freeze our money. Don't touch our money. Don't move it. Don't mingle it with any other.
Keep it as USD.
Keep it as US dollars. We worked hard. It's US dollars. So they wrote that letter to the bank. As you know, Mkoma Farai, come February of 2019, the Central Bank, the Reserve Bank, then issued a statutory instrument commonly known as SI 33 of 2019. In SI 33 of 2019, the Central Bank then said, we are now introducing a new Zimbabwean currency called the RTGS dollar. This currency is gauge one-on-one with the US dollar. However, all balances that were expressed in US dollars, they are now a RTGS dollars. Initially exchanged at 1:2.5, but later on will float this exchange rate. So that means that anyone who had his own bank account and it had US dollars, suddenly on the 21st of February 2019, you woke up where you had US dollars, you suddenly had RTGS dollars. So my clients, like most Zimbabweans, then said, but hang on a minute, I put a US dollar in my account. How come I now have a creature called RTGS dollars? So they then went to court, and the case that they presented before the courts is that if I leave you with my cow and ask you to look after my cow, you can't, when I demand the same, give me a goat or give me mangoes, because mangoes are not equal to a cow. You have to give me my cow because I gave you a cow. And many Zimbabweans were saying the same thing and are saying the same thing, but I was earning US dollars. I was paying my pension in US dollars. How come the central bank just woke up one morning and said, my cow is now a banana? It's not a banana. So the critical question that was before the court was, is a cow a banana? If I bang a cow, should I get a banana? And the court said, a cow is a cow. If I deposit and leave my cow with you, kwa chenda mbuya, ndofana kuotora muri yangu ichiti me kwetu kundipa chimbudzi kana chinguruwe. That was what was at the center of this case. But you know, there's been a history.
Yes.
Because when I was first instructed in 2019. So in 2019, we took the matter to the High Court and said the actions of the Reserve Bank were unreasonable. They were unreasonable. It's irrational just to change one asset. It's irrational to make that law apply retrospectively. So we went to court and won before Justice Joe. But Justice Joe then proceeded to make constitutional amendments. We had not raised constitutional issues. We had just raised review issues. This is unreasonable. But Justice Joe said, but it's also unconstitutional. The bank appealed to the Supreme Court and said, Justice Joe, vakashaisha, vakazopinda muconstitutional matter say, isi tinombo
isirio yangeri
nyaya yacho. Nyaya yangeri pabengeri review. Reserve Bank yakapenga. Sanyaya yangeri pengeri yekupenga kwe Reserve Bank kwete ye constitutional issue. So Supreme Court yakabvati Justice Joe vakashaisha. So we lost that case. When we lost that case last year, we then had to start again and say, okay, let's now go panyaya yakanzi ne Supreme Court. Amuna ku mangamusina kui ngemaitaura ye constitutional issue. So constitutional issue yatakazoendesa kumatare yangere yekuti section 71 yebumbiro remutemo weZimbabwe inotaura kuti munhu wese ane kodzero dzokuona property. Ingave imba, ingave sutu, ingave radio, ingave ma-intellectual rights, ndanzwa muchiridza vana macheso emunomu. So anyone anoona property, bumbiro remutemo rinoti hapana munhu anotenderwa kutorerwa property yake pasina mutemo of a general application, pasina zvikonzero zviri in the national interest, uyezve pasina compensation. So my Penelope Stone nava Richard Biti vakabva vaenda kudare vakuti mutemo uya wakaiswa neReserve Bank muna 2019 effect yacho yange iri yekuita compulsory acquire, unlawfully acquire their US dollars without compensation. So it became a constitutional issue, yava to a review issue. Yekuti zvakaitwa neReserve Bank ndezvekupenga here apa yakodzero. Kuti iwe haungangouya kumba kwanguka. Ungotora suti yangu kana motikari yangu. Pasina mutemo, pasina chibvumirano, pasina national interest yawandirakidza, and pasina compensation. Ndo nyaya yazotongwa pane mutongo wakaburitswa last week High Court through Justice Mafusire judgment number High Court 1118 of 2023 yazotaura kuti but mutemo uyu wakatotora kavalue yevanhu, asi chakanyanyobatsira High Court inyaya yekuti musi wa7 May 2022 last year, you remember zvanetsa President Mnangagwa vakatoita press conference iri Saturday manheru vakati mari dzakatorwa dzedzi takambotora dzedziya takakanganisa ipo pai tofanira kukombenzeta vanhu saka patakazoenda kudare isusu President Mnangagwa vakaita statement yavo musi wa7 May kesi yedu yakanzwikwa muna June saka isi takabva taenda takabata chibepo chaiche chava Mnangagwa tikati hona izvi.
So tiri papo, and I'll just say this, or I'll ask in English so that as many people can get this. But 7 May, as you quite rightly say, the president issued a statement saying we want to restore lost value.
Exactly.
So one question would be, why not wait to have your value restored? Why, or is it because the court process had already begun?
Number one, the court process had already begun. Two, we couldn't rely on a government that had from 2019 in this case and other cases it kept on saying it was geje, there was never any loss of value. So we couldn't rely on a statement, more so a statement made by a politician. If it was an act of parliament, if government had gone to parliament and said we are now passing a law to compensate people, it would have been a different thing. But more importantly, the president's announcement on the 7th of May was that they would only compensate those whose balances in banks were less than 1,000. And 142,000 is different from 1,000. So even on that statement, Richard and Penny had no relief because the relief was only applying to people with 1,000.
Okay. So now looking at the importance or significance of that ruling, as you are saying, or what you've gathered is the High Court is saying it was unconstitutional. It violated Section 71 of the Constitution, right to property. What happens now? Does it mean or my value was converted? Can I now go to my bank and say I want US dollars, or do I need to launch my own proceedings? What happens to all those people who are affected?
Firstly, Mkoma Farai, this judgment has to be confirmed by the Constitutional Court. So wherever a lower court, a high court or a magistrate court, for the magistrate court has no powers, but wherever a high court or even the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land is the Constitutional Court. So wherever a lower court declares invalid an act of parliament, a provision in the act of parliament, or a provision in a statutory instrument, that order is not final until the Constitutional Court is confirmed. So this judgment has to be confirmed by the Constitutional Court. And I know right now, talking to you, that the registrar of the High Court has already sent the record to the Constitutional Court, and in the next few days I expect to receive a letter from the Constitutional Court saying, give us heads of arguments, tipei mutemo, tipei chingwa, chinotaura judgment inofanira kuconfirmwa here, and so forth. So that process has to happen. Once this judgment has been confirmed, then it means anyone who was in a similar position, munhu wese akatorwa mari yake, can now look at this judgment and rely on it, because it's now a judgment of the land, confirmed by the Constitutional Court. However, some people will have a problem. Some people will have a problem. There are some people who just accepted the changeover, took their money and ate it. So those people, the banks will be able to say, but chamar, wakadya kamari yako.
It was implied
waka-accepta. Pachirungu inonzi waiver. You waived your rights. Zvasiyana na Penny Stone na Richard Biti, who said no to the bank, don't touch our money. Don't touch our money, don't mix it with. And when the changeover came, they left it like that and said would rather die than kubirirwa kuti mali yedu inoluza a value. Ndo chekutanga. Chichaita problem. Chechipiri chichaita problem ndechekuti kune vamwe vanhu vakanyora tsamba, vakaenda kubengi vakanyora tsamba, vakanditipei mari yedu, but havana zvavakazoita. Mutemo unotaura kuti kana waita demand, date yatopo, date kana yayopo, date ine time manje, inotika time. Mutemo wacho unonzi Prescription Act. So saka date inotaura kuti kana waane chikwereti changu inini chinobva nechekuti kana tarovana ndakurova iwewe ndikakubvisa muno saka ndatone date kandofanira kucompensate unofanira kuacta within 3 years. Ukasaacta within 3 years wadya izvozvo. Saka muchiona kuti 3 years dzakatopfuura from February 2019 to now 2019 2020 2021 iko zvino tamuna 2023. However, kana wakanga wangogara zvako, if you just stayed and said I'm not touching this money, you can write a letter to the bank and say I'm not demanding my money. So the clock now starts ticking today in 2023. You've got a cause of action. However, that's not the end of the story. There are many people, particularly pensioners, who were paying their pension contributions in US dollars. They now woke up one day suddenly receiving RTGS balances. This judgment, if confirmed, will benefit them and benefit them tremendously. There are people who made investments. There are people who made investments in accounts. You understand? They bought shares in US dollars. This judgment will help them. So this judgment will help a lot of people, particularly pensioners who worked so hard. Some of them lost money when Zimbabwe moved from the currency from Zimbabwean dollar to US dollar in March of 2009. Then there are those who started paying US dollar pensions, and I'm sure you're one of them, from 2009 now. And they thought they were happy that I've got a US dollar pension. Come 21 February 2019, they suddenly found themselves being given RTGS dollars. So this judgment will help them. And the Constitution is very clear. The law of prescription does not apply to pension payments. So this judgment will help very much, which is why my appeal is that the government must listen to the judgment, because the judgment is not creating anything new. It's already supporting what the president had said on the 7th of May. So instead of having a haphazard process, the government must actually come up with an act of parliament that deals with how people are going to be compensated. And in so doing, they will call on experts. We, the lawyers, I've been working on this case for a long time, and I know a lot of things about this thing. So lawyers, accountants, actuarial scientists, to come up with a bill that deals with the adequate ways and methods of compensating our people, so that we create a win-win situation. I don't want a situation where it's us versus the government. It's not us versus the government, because everyone lost money. Everyone lost money in Zimbabwe, whether you're a cabinet minister, whether you are my sister from Chendambuya or my cousin from Ngai, you lost money. So the nation lost money. Let's find a way, buttressed by parliament, buttressed by an act of parliament, that will deal with this. In Russia, the Russian ruble lost value after perestroika in the mid 80s. It lost a lot of money. So the Russian government, with the assistance and support of the ILO, International Labour Organization, compensated these people through an act of parliament. That is what needs to be done.
Let's talk a bit about the next process. I suppose, as you said, you are expecting that the Constitutional Court will come to you, ask for these heads of arguments, and without wanting to preempt what might happen there. First of all, when you look at the implications from, the stability of the financial sector and all that, companies could be left in very, very dire situations and positions. The practicality of actually them upholding this. Secondly, I believe in a case, I think it's a Zambezi gas case that was heard by the court some time back. The Constitutional Court seemed to uphold that is okay, that conversion was okay. Perhaps you could school us here and give us more information.
Yes,
but perhaps that gives it sort of gave an impression that, or it had taken a position that conversion or the change from Zim dollar to US dollar was okay, and things like that. What was the position in that case? And if it did indeed uphold that, can it overturn its position before from
Thank
from
you
the
very
past?
much, and I'm so pleased that you obviously have researched for this interview. So in Baba versus Zambezi, number one, it was not a Constitutional Court judgment. It was a Supreme Court judgment by the Chief Justice Malaba. So what happened in Zambezi was that there was a company with a judgment. The judgment was expressed in US dollars, an order, a court order in US dollars. So they tried to execute, but execute after February of 2019. The debtor then said, but no, I'm now supposed to just pay you RTGS dollars. The matter then went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, look, SI 33 of 2019, the statutory instrument, now says any debt that was in existence in Zimbabwe, expressed in any other currency, US dollars or rand, is now to be converted on 1:1 to RTGS dollars. So you, Mr. Zambezi, can only get Zim dollars. Now, that is a totally different thing now. Here, that law is the one that is now being challenged. Here, that law, Statutory Instrument 33, which then became an Act of Parliament through Act number 7 of 2019, which was passed in Parliament in September of 2019, is Act number 2 of 2019, is the one we are now challenging. So what my clients have done is to say, let's hit the snake on the head, and the snake on the head is the Act of Parliament. And so if you read the last page of that judgment, it says we are setting aside Exchange Control Directive R 120 of 2018. We are setting aside Section 2, Section what of the Reserve Bank Act. That's hitting the nail on the head. Those are itika. So Zambezi is not interpreting the Constitution and constitutional rights. Zambezi is just interpreting what SI 33 means. And SI 33 was very clear in black and white. It said, if there was any debt expressed in US dollars, that debt must now become RTGS dollars. If you were running books of accounts expressing them in US dollars, they must now, from today, the 21st of February, which is called the effective date, they must now become RTGS dollars. That's Zambezi. So it wasn't a constitutional issue, it was just an interpretation of SI 33 of 2019. This judgment is not an interpretation of, it is saying that SI 33 is unconstitutional.
So let me ask you this, and you are a member of Parliament, obviously a lawyer, and also a lawyer, so I think you'd be a great person to answer this. At the time these things were enacted, these SIs derive their, you have the primary lawmaking power, but you allow ministries to make these SIs. If it was patently wrong, bad, that is, if MPs could see, or if we could see it was wrong, then why did Parliament proceed to pass it? Why weren't red flags raised then to say mtemo ya wito?
Yeah, you raise an important point. So the problem that is happening is that the majority, by far the majority of laws that have been made in Zimbabwe affecting materially the economy, they have not been made by Parliament. They've been made through statutory instruments. Some of the statutory instruments have been made by the President using the Presidential Temporal Measures Act. They've been presidential decrees. Some of them have been statutory instruments made by the Minister in terms of Section 2 of the Finance Act. Section 2 of the Finance Act and Section 3 allows the Minister of Finance to make regulations to change taxes. So I want to give two examples of the use of this power. The first one, you remember that Minister Mtuli became a minister on the 1st of September 2018. And when he became a minister, the first announcement he made on the 5th of September 2018 was a press statement announcing that he had increased the rate of intermediated money transfer tax from the insignificant amount it was 0.05%, you didn't even know that it existed, to 5%. So it was done outside parliament. Parliamentarians, like every Zimbabweans, just woke up one morning. So when he announced, they started collecting taxes. Up until October, someone then told him, no, you need a statutory instrument. So only in October did he pass a statutory instrument. But the problem with the statutory instrument now, Parliament has no role. Parliament has no role because it's just a minister who passes a statutory instrument dependent on the enabling legislation. We had to challenge Mufundo Mlilo, a Harare resident, challenged this the imposition of IMMT. And he won in the High Court of Zimbabwe. It was set aside. And there were two things that were set aside. First was the first phase where the minister just announced that tax had been increased without a legal instrument. Second was the second phase, the statutory instrument itself. He was only served in that, Minister Mtuli, in December of 2018, then amended the Income Tax Act and increased the IMMT rate through the Finance Act. You remember, the Finance Act is a taxing legislation. That's how. So the court there was also quite sad and said, but you can't do this. Yeah. So that's the first law that is being used by the government to make important decisions on the economy, bypassing parliament. The second law that is being used is the Presidential Powers Act. So SI 33 was actually passed by the president. SI 140, remember there was SI 33.
Yes.
Then there was SI 142, which said the currency of Zimbabwe is now exclusively, which was passed in June of 2019, again presidential decrees. So parliament is now suffering in that there is over-regulation that is taking place in the office of the president and the office of the minister of finance outside parliament. So parliament has now been reduced into an innocent bystander. We are now in the terraces.
Can't you take back that power?
We should take it back. We should take it back because Section 134 of the Constitution says Parliament can delegate lawmaking powers to ministers, which is okay and good because Parliament can't legislate on everything. But Parliament can't delegate its primary lawmaking powers. So here we've got two pieces of legislation which have a problem. Section 2 of the Presidential Powers Act gives primary lawmaking power to the president. Section 2 and 3 of the Finance Act gives primary lawmaking power to the minister. So Parliament should claw back its powers.
Indeed.
I hope because
no, that's true. Listeners, do get in touch with us. We've got some messages coming through. I'll get to them very shortly. 0731 168 045 0731 168 045. You can ask your question and get some clarity on these very important issues. I want to go back to the question I asked. I think you then answered the issue of the case I had raised. The earlier part of my question was again, without trying to preempt what the Constitutional Court might do, given the implications that this ruling might have on the financial well-being of insurance companies, banks and things like that. Is it practical to enforce?
Yes. So in terms of Section 175 subsection 6 of the Constitution, the Constitutional Court has got powers of making an order that is in the best interest of justice and society. So where the Constitutional Court feels that a particular order might have consequences, it can suspend the operation of that order for a period of time to give people to sort their powers. It can limit the retrospectivity of that order. So they've done that before. They've done that in many cases. We are suspending this order. So I want to give you an example. In 2017, I went to the Constitutional Court. You remember that there were so many demonstrations in 2017. So the police, through a man called Nubet Saunyama, then invoked Section 27 of the then Public Order Security Act and said, we have banned demonstrations and marches in Harare. So on behalf of a political party called Dare, Nera and others, I was briefed to go to the court. And I went to the court. Justice Makarau said Section 27 is unconstitutional. But he suspended the order for a few months to give the authorities sufficient time to come up with a new law so that there will be no vacuum.
Yeah.
So the court can do that. So in this case now, the Constitutional Court can suspend this judgment for 3 months to give the government, the financial institutions, in particular pension houses, banks, asset houses, sufficient time to put their house in order. We would have no problem with that. It happens in every other country. So you do that in order to make sure that there's a smooth, transition. I urge that the decision is not about when you make a decision. Mukoma Farai. And this judgment is very clear. The government has got powers to govern, but govern it in terms of the law. Don't govern it and break your laws. That's what this judgment is saying. This judgment is saying you are bound by legality. You are bound by the rule of law. You are bound by constitutionalism. The government can easily resolve this just by a simple act of a parliament. And remember, we have another mess in the pension sector.
Yes. I was going to say, actually, well, some people are getting in touch and asking about that. But go ahead.
So the pension sector, the value of the pension industry in Zimbabwe at the end of December 2008 was $5.86 billion. So you remember we had the huge pension funds like the Mining Industrial Pension Fund, the local authorities pension fund, and so forth. But these houses lost their money because of the hyperinflation and the many zeros that were removed from our currency. So Justice Smith in March of 2017 presented a report called the Justice Smith Commission Report, which said the government pensioners had lost their $5.86 billion US dollars and they have to be compensated. It then ascribed who was wrong, who caused the background, the loss. It said government was responsible for 46% for mismanaging the economy. It also said the banks were responsible for 22% because they were living greedy lives, driving fancy cars, and just basically stealing from pensioners. The remaining percentage, he said, you, the regulator, IPEC, the Insurance Pension Commission of Zimbabwe, you were not supervising these people well.
Adequately.
So up to now, there's been no compensation. But it's quite clear that people are working on compensation. People are working on modalities to compensate pensions. So I believe that the Constitutional Court should concentrate on the legal issue. Was there an unlawful expropriation of value in 2009? Was there an unlawful expropriation of value when Exchange Control Directive R120 of 2018 was passed? Surely the answer is a yes, because as I said, US dollar and RTGS are two different things. A donkey and a cow are two different things.
But if we are saying you have a cow, it's worth 3 donkeys, and I give you 3 donkeys, I've effectively given you your cow.
No, you have not. You have not. You then have to say, which is what people are now doing. And the law doesn't say that. The law says gejke 1:1. That's what the law says. And the court has said, but gejke is a fiction. The government itself, through President Mnangagwa on the 7th of May, said, but gejke is a fiction. We made a mistake. We'll compensate you. So that debate is therefore out. So the real debate here is the modalities of compensation. Which is why I said when Advocate Terai Mafukidze, and I want to thank him very much, whom we briefed to argue the matter, when he went to the Constitutional Court, to the High Court before Justice Mafutsire, he had 3 key things. The first one was that statement made
by the President,
by the Chief Executive Officer of the country on the 7th of May 2022. The second was the non-denial by the bank, by the Minister of Finance, and by the Reserve Bank, the contention by Penny Stone and Richard Biti that the $142,000 US in June of last year was now less than 200 US dollars. That was not contested. And if we use today's exchange rate of 1:1,200, it's $60. So 60 US dollars and 142,000 Mukoma Farai.
Let's take through some of the contributions that are coming through from listeners. Get in touch with us, 0731 168 045. 0731 168 045. Would love to hear from you. There are many and they are varied. I'll read a few and allow you, Honorable, to respond to some of them. Some of them already covering some of the issues you've spoken about. There's a listener who is asking, can this rule, the ruling also apply to the 2008 period? I was supposed to receive my dad's pension from insurance proceeds at NASA during the period. I didn't get a chance and that value was lost. I think you've spoken a bit about that. Someone says it was a deliberate loot by the government. I don't think this government will compensate anyone unless sued in the court by those with lawyers. Another listener here saying, why did the government fail to compensate the citizens when Zimbabwe dollars collapsed in 2008-9? Thank you for this interview. I am learning. Now, can I ask, as for now, can we trust these Nostro USD accounts such that I can have $20,000 in my account? Is there a law where you reverse these Nostro accounts to RTGS? And I think that raises quite a fundamental issue. There's a term, I think that has been coined in various platforms where people say rule by SI. When you have when you have so many SIs coming out, what does that do about confidence in because the law must be certain. I must know what it.
Yeah. So it's a point I was trying to say. Firstly, Mkoma Farai, the place where laws are made is Parliament. It's Parliament. And the Parliament is obliged in Section 119 to make laws for the good order and good governance of Zimbabwe. So Parliament can't just wake up one morning and say, we're making a law that says anyone born in Zimbabwe from parents that came from Mozambique, you're out, because that law is against good order and governance. That's number one. Number two, when Parliament makes a law, there must be public consultation. Section 114(1) of the Constitution is very clear. Any law must be subjected to public consultation. That's why you see parliamentary portfolio committees going outside in the countryside, soliciting people's views. People went, you recall, the Justice Committee went out in the villages last year and in 2021, consulting people's views on the Section 40 of the Marriages Act. You remember the notorious Section 40. You understand?
Yes.
Right now, the Justice Committee is out there in the communities seeking views on the patriotic bill. So there are certain safeguards. The citizen, the Constitution says the power of Parliament is derived from the people. Now you then have a problem when a minister just wakes up one morning and makes statutory instruments without public consultation. So that is the problem of governing by decree and of governing by statutory instruments. The law becomes uncertain. You know that, Farai, when the government de-dollarized in 2018 and 19, when SI 33 of 2019 was passed, when SI 142 of 2019 was passed, economists, parliamentarians on both sides of the house said conditions for de-dollarization don't exist. Zimbabwe is not yet ready to introduce its currency because people don't trust. People remember the monies that they lost, so there's a trust deficit. Now, if you read the last monetary policy statement that was issued by the Reserve Bank governor on the 26th of January 2023, the Reserve Bank governor is now saying, 78% of the people are using US dollars. Your inflation, the way you're calculating inflation is wrong because you are still using the RTGS dollars. So the Reserve Bank governor, who was told that de-dollarization won't work, is now reaping from his own failure because de-dollarization has failed. So these policy inconsistencies are dangerous. That's why we must go to Parliament. Because in Parliament has got 300 people. These people come from communities. They are lobbied by workers, ZCTU, Zimbabwe Federation of Trade Unions. They are lobbied by the church. They are lobbied by business people. They work with the people. They sit with the people. I am the MP for Harare East. On Greendale alone, Ward 9, I'm on 16 WhatsApp groups. 8 in Highlands. I don't know how many in Tafara. People telling me, and I read them. I don't respond, but I see what the people are talking about. That's why it's important that we don't rule by decree. We don't rule by statutory instrument. We go to Parliament.
Listener here asking, you've spoken quite a bit up. You talked about the pension sector, but a listener here is saying, what does this mean? What does the ruling mean for the medical insurance or medical aid we had been paying in US dollars, and then when they turned to RTGS, we have failed to benefit as we used to? Same question applies to our funeral cover. What does this judgment mean to the two sectors?
Yes. So, when these insurance companies, when these medical aid societies receive these contributions, by operation of law, the Pension and Provident Fund Act, they are supposed to protect Mkoma Farai. They are supposed to protect the worker who is contributing. They're supposed to protect the worker who is contributing. So they must ring fence these amounts. And they've been doing so. The biggest company in Zimbabwe is the Old Mutual, by virtue of physical assets. They own malls, they own buildings. A third of the offices in Harare are probably owned by the Old Mutual. Second is First Mutual. You understand? They also invest on blue chip counters on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange. They buy shares. So any contribution that was made in US dollars up until 1st of February, or rather 1st of March 2019, before we change over the currency, that value in US dollar is sitting somewhere, either in the form of a building. So the Insurance Pension Commission and the government of Zimbabwe must be able to say to the pensioner, but you are holding on to this building. This building belongs to the pensioners. You can't give them RTGS, which is valueless. Then we can now talk about those assets now. That and what happened after the 1st of March, when everyone was now earning RTGS, is now a different ballgame. But for the period 2009 to 1st of March 2019, when we had a monocurrency known as the US dollars, the government should be able, through legislation, to decouple the investments and separate the assets. The same applies to 2008, 2009. One of your listeners asked the question on WhatsApp. She says, my dad was contributing. But after 2009, I was told that there was no pension. Now, you know that the Zimbabwean dollar was stable. Up until November, Black Friday, 14 November 1997, the exchange rate was fixed for years, 1:15. Then it collapsed by 70% on Black Friday, 14 November. Assets were acquired. Where are those assets? Assets were acquired. I was in Parliament recently. I'm a member of the Budget Committee. We were dealing with the case of Zisco Steel pensioners who were suddenly told by the First Mutual Life that their pensions were valueless. I asked the representative of the First Mutual Life, in March of 2009, what was the value of this fund? He said 1.5 million US dollars. I said, but how did you arrive? How did you convert? So the problem which we are having is that we are having these insurance companies that who are using unilateral, artificial, fraudulent methods of conversion. And then we've got a regulator who is run by some people in the board of players as well. I would like to submit that IPEC should not have commissioners who run and own pension funds, because there's a conflict of interest. There's a conflict of interest. So as a result, the worker is suffering because married biwa neshigananda. So dopaita problem ipapo. Our government should protect the workers. Our government should protect the workers. But the government itself is also stealing from the workers, because NASA, which was receiving contributions in US dollars, is also paying people in RTGS dollars. Yet NASA receives 20-30 million US dollars per month, US dollars. So that's why I said, let's have a comprehensive solution. And the most comprehensive solution is an act of parliament where labor, pensioners and their organizations, churches will have a say. The pension houses will also have a say. The regulators will also have a say. The experts, particularly from the International Labour Organization, from the World Bank, from the IMF, will also have a say. And we come up with a win-win situation. This situation where we are having sporadic relief. The Bitis go to court, this one goes to court, this one goes to court. It's not good enough. It's a national problem which requires a comprehensive national solution. And I hope the Minister of Finance is listening to this interview. I hope the Minister of Labour, Professor Mavima, is listening. I hope the Minister of Justice, Professor Ziyambi is listening, because those are the three most important ministers when it comes to the ultimate resolution of this
on this challenge,
loss of value.
Listener, again, contributions coming through. Some of the issues you may already have touched on, but I think it's very important to reiterate some of them. Thank you so much, Honorable Biti, for unpacking this judgment. My question is, can a statutory instrument override an act of parliament or a section in the Constitution? I think that's quite an important question there.
No. A statutory instrument can't override an act of parliament. A statutory instrument can't override the constitution. An act of parliament itself can't override the constitution. But the problem which we actually now have, we have had statutory instruments, particularly those made in terms of the Presidential Temporal Measures Act, actually overriding acts of parliament. And which is why the discussion which we had before, parliament must claw back its powers. Using section 134 of the Constitution, and must simply say your power to the minister is just regulatory, not to step in our shoes as the primary law-making authority in Zimbabwe.
Indeed. More listener contributions, 0731 168 045, 0731 168 045. Will this ruling not affect people who then cleared off their US dollar mortgages in RTGS?
You know why I'm laughing? Because there are people who also benefited.
True.
People who also benefited. So this is my point exactly. Because the bankers will be able to say, but we also lost. Because we were owed money in US dollars. And that money, and I'm a lawyer, I was acting for certain big banks. And we had to write off. So that is why the government now, when it looks at this, that's why we need a comprehensive bill. But I want to say that it's a small amount, because remember, credit in this economy died. There's no higher purchase. There's hardly any mortgage market. So it's a flimsy defense by financial institutions. I think the real issue is, let's have an honest conversation. Let's compensate the working people who lost their savings, the pension houses who lost pensioner houses. Let's compensate them. Obviously, it's a gradual process. Yeah, but let's do that. We create a win-win situation. I want to say something.
Okay, go ahead. I was going to ask, where will the resources come from?
This country is very rich. If you read the latest monetary policy statement, Governor John Manguja is boasting that our exports in 2019, our exports in 2022 were 11 billion US dollars. This country is very rich, but there's misallocation of resources. There is the embezzlement of resources. So I'm not worried about that. We have 63 minerals, Mkoma Farai. Of those minerals, we've got world-class deposits of platinum, world-class deposits of gold, world-class deposits of chrome, world-class deposits of diamonds. Now, we now have world-class deposits of lithium. Lithium is the new black gold. We have a viable financial service sector. We have a viable service industry. We have a viable manufacturing sector. I know one or two things about what I'm talking about because I used to be finance minister. So the problem is not the supply side. The problem is not the richness of Zimbabwe. The problem is policy making, policy consistency, and policy honesty. That's what we're missing. But the point I wanted to say, Farai, is this: that in Zimbabwe we have a problem, and that's why the government needs to resolve this issue holistically. If you go to a bank account and put your money, you'll be phoned 2 months later and say, Mkoma Farai, marenya kusina yakajiwa. Banks are making their profits 76% from non-interest income. We don't have savings in Zimbabwe. There's no savings in Zimbabwe. So if all developed countries have developed because of savings, how do savings work? If I put my money in a bank and I'm not using it, someone else, this comrade, is going to borrow that money to start an industry. But when you don't have service, you don't have the basis of capital accumulation. China, for instance, has got savings to GDP ratio of 50%. Developmental economists will tell you that a country needs savings which are at least 25% of GDP. We don't have savings. So resolving this current issue will deal with the issue of savings, will recover pension funds. You heard me in Parliament last week saying to Minister Mavima, when are we going to move from defined contribution to defined benefit? Because when you've got defined benefit, you now have a fund sitting with money. You know there was the mining industrial pension fund, there was the local authorities pension fund. Those pension funds are nowhere in sight. So if this country has to move, it must create avenues of capital accumulation, and capital accumulation is savings and pension funds. So reform of this area and the holistic area is part of resolving the economic conundrum that we have, that 44 years after independence, the per capita income of a Zimbabwean is US $125, one of the poorest countries in sub-Saharan Africa. That's not good enough.
Let me ask you this, Honorable Biti. You say that we need an act of parliament. As we know, time is running out for this parliament because the elections are due. How realistic is it that this will actually happen?
If there's political will, you could have an act of parliament. You could have an act of parliament in 1 month, in 2 months. What you'll do in that act of parliament is that you just allow that there will be compensation, you allow the principles, but you allow the statutory instrument to answer the technical questions where scientists are needed. We did it with the Public Finance Management Act. With the Public Finance Management Act, we've signed the Public Finance Management Act, but the devil is in the statutory instrument. So you can do that if there's political will. So what is missing is just the political will, and which is why I implored my friends, the Minister of Labour, my friend, the Minister of Justice, my friend, the Minister of Finance, Prof. Mutuli, to set up a subcommittee that will deal with this issue. There are so many experts that can help them in the private sector, in the public sector. People like Dr. Kanyenze can help them in the private sector, even though he works for an insurance company. People like Douglas Woto are proper experts in actuarial science. So there are so many people who can help in this process.
Let me just come back because we're almost running out of time, to come back to the core of the discussion today. Obviously, this ruling, as you said, the Constitutional Court will need to confirm this. If things do not go your way, what will be the next step? Is there another avenue, or is that the end of it?
Well, look, what I can tell you is that there are so many other cases in the pipeline. There are so many other cases in the pipeline that are dealing with this issue. So the Stone Biti matter is just one of many. So the Constitutional Court will know that. But I'll be surprised, without prejudging the Constitutional Court. It's not in dispute And once the president makes the statement he makes on the 7th of May, go bora, that's the end of the story. Because the president accepts in his statement that Geje was fiction. That Governor Mangundla was not correct. I hope he was sober. He was not correct. Geje is a fiction. And the president says, we must compensate. So that's the end of the story.
Which goes back to the question I asked earlier. Ticha compensate, Amirai, Bora Pasi, be patient.
No, the Constitutional Court deals with legal issues. It is the government now. And the government must go and say, look, but we need time. And the court has got powers in terms of Section 175, Subsection 6, as I said before. And no one will quarrel with that. But you can't tell me, you see, this is the other thing which is very cruel. And CAPS must pay, certainly the Stone Biti studio. Because the Exchange Control Directive 120 of 2018 said you must know your customer. You must know where this money is coming. And they knew that Stone Biti was getting their money from their architectural practice. They knew that, Stone Biti designed the World Bank building in Arundel. Arundel Park. They designed that. So they were able to prove that our money came from the World Bank. So why grab their money as a bank? That's why at first instance we don't use the constitutional route, because it was such an obvious thing. CAPS took money. CAPS has got US dollars. Return that money.
We are out of time, so we must end this discussion here, Honorable. But I want to thank you so much for coming through and for sharing those insights. A lot of people saying that they've learned. I'm sure there are, there's more to unfold in this case and in this story. Absolutely. Of very keen interest to many, many people. Absolutely. And so we'll keep our eye on it. But thank you so much.
For the Constitutional Court judgment.
Fantastic. Up next is Our Story with Chilla, so please stay tuned for that and a whole lot more. This is ZiFM Stereo, my station, your station. My name is Farai Mwakutuya. Thank you so much for joining us on the platform, and even extra thank you to all the people who engaged with us, who sent us your messages. We love to hear from you. Keep it Z. Have a fantastic evening. Good night.